You don't have to look very far around the internet today, in YouTube, etc., to find a lot of talk about something that is being called the Great Reset. Okay, so the Great Reset is something that's come in the wake of 2020, and we see all kinds of very high-level politicians, business leaders, etc., discussing this idea of the need for a Great Reset. Okay, now, because of the fact that on this channel we talk a lot about people who are trying to escape government control, people who want more freedom, people who want to experience life on their own terms, people who are interested in going abroad, etc. That tends to interest these types of people and creates a certain amount of fear that drives that kind of behavior. So today, I'm going to discuss with you guys what is the mainstream narrative, what is kind of some of the reality around the Great Reset, and what you should or shouldn't be doing about it. Okay, so for those of you who do not know, I'm Michael from Offshore Citizen. Welcome. Thank you for joining our channel. If you have not already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We love subscribers. You're wonderful. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have videos you'd like to see me create, please put them in the description below. In the comments below. Would love to hear from you on your thoughts about this and others. Check out our other videos. And if you're at all interested in the subjects that we deal with, which are how to reduce your taxes to pay the lowest legal amount possible. We help with international tax planning. How to set up international companies or help with setting up international companies. If you want to do business in another country, maybe you have an online business, maybe you're a digital nomad, maybe you're an investor, you'd like to invest globally, you're interested in second residencies or other residencies, moving abroad, getting second citizenships, doing banking, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, let's dive in. So, as I was mentioning, there is a ton of information out there, a ton of videos, and especially I would say kind of like fear type videos around the Great Reset. And as a result, it prompted some of our subscribers to make some comments to me saying, hey, could you do a video on this subject? And I want to kind of start by framing the mainstream narrative and what I'm going to term the conspiracy narrative. And as usual, I think that the mainstream narratives are usually deceptive, and there's probably some concern there. And the reality is, typically conspiracy type narratives are off base, and so the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and we're going to kind of go through that. So, what is the mainstream narrative? Well, the mainstream narrative is kicked off. I think it's from the IMF, the World Bank. There was a little video clip that was put out on Twitter a few years ago from the IMF, where it kind of gave this depiction of the future. They said, hey, listen, what is 2030 going to look like? And part of it, they said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And of course, that's quite frightening to a certain group of people. It probably should be frightening to you if you're not aware. We can look throughout periods of history and we can see how private property ownership laws really were instrumental in helping a society to advance, in large part because of the accountability and the incentive structure that it built around how we take care of things and how we advance things, right? Your incentive to go and to improve a piece of property that you own versus one that you rent is dramatically different, right? And we can see examples from communism, we can see examples from on various native reserves, etc., of how when you deprive people of the private property, those private property rights, it's not a good thing. It does not work out well, okay? So that idea, whether it is put out there maliciously or naively, is one that is probably worth pushing back against, right? The thing that kind of, when you listen to all these different politicians, etc., talk about it, the narrative is, hey, we need to take the situation in 2020 and we need to use that as an opportunity to refocus and to have a reset where we focus on the priorities of global equity, eliminating the gaps between rich and poor, fighting poverty, working on improving the environment, protecting the environment, etc., right? Things that are on the surface well-intentioned and that a lot of people would have concerns with how those things are gone about. For instance, I don't think that there's anyone who wants to destroy the environment. It seems kind of stupid, but there's a lot of disagreement over, what's the best way to address the environment given the social and economic and other concerns, right? Likewise, you might say, hey, listen, we don't want poverty, right? I don't think there's anybody sitting there advocating for poverty, But on the other hand, what do you do about poverty? Do you solve that in a capitalistic way? Do you solve that in a redistributive way? Do you solve it in some other way, right? These are different conversations. So that's the mainstream narrative, right? Is that all these politicians and business leaders are busy saying, hey, we need a reset and we need to focus on these priorities. On the flip side, we have what I would call the conspiracy theory viewpoint, okay? I've got lots of friends who are, what some people would call conspiracy theorists. Some of them, they would probably call themselves awake. And they say, hey, listen, there's going to be a debt reset. There's going to be a currency reset. This is a method of seizing power and taking control, okay? So that's over here. Now, let's clear up a couple things on this. So first of all, it seems to me highly improbable that there would be the suggestion of the advancement of a massive debt reset. Why is this? Typically because the creditors, right, the people who are lending the money, are the people who are supposedly, the ones who want to rule the world or whatever. So that seems very bizarre to me, right? It's not like people who are, like, if you think about, hey, listen, I'm after power, right? And then, I want to kind of like enslave people. Well, debt is basically a form of enslavement. And now we come along and we say, hey, we're going to just reset the debt. And okay, what they'll say is, in some of these stories, they'll say, look, you're going to have your debts wiped out, but you're not allowed to own anything going forward after that. Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. It's like, who do they owe that money to, right? They owe that money to the people who are supposedly making this arrangement. And what do those people make? The incentive structure there does not really strike me as logical, okay? So I can give you with a fairly high degree of confidence the idea that a global debt reset by the quote-unquote elites is very unlikely to be being planned. That's really, the term reset probably triggers the wrong set of thoughts, okay? Then we have this idea of a currency reset, okay? And I got into a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were talking about this possibility of, oh, hey, the dollar's going to hyperinflate, maybe we're going to go to a global currency, things like this. I can tell you with absolute certainty, there is zero chance that we're going to a global currency in the next 5 years. Okay, why? How can I assure you of this? Not because of the fact that somebody doesn't want it. Of course, some people want it, right? Of course, there's lots, that's a whole other conversation. But the timelines make zero sense if you actually understand the mechanics of implementing something like this. So you can just look at any large-scale project, right? And you can ask, okay, how long does it take to bring in the electronic infrastructure? How long does it take to bring in the legal structure? How long does it take to implement the payment systems, etc.? These things are not fast things to do, okay? These things take a long time. So are we going towards a digital currency in the future? Absolutely, 100%. That is not just, that's not even debatable. If you think that 30 years from now we're not gonna have a digital currency, you're probably extremely, you've got a very different view than me, let's put it that way. I'd love to hear how you rationalize that, because I think that it's, such a minuscule percentage chance that we aren't doing digital currency at that point in time, right? In a sense, we already have a lot of digital currency in that, you swipe your Visa, it's digital, right? Some people would argue blockchain, etc. Now, are we going to a single world currency? Not anytime soon. Why not? Because countries are not going to want to give up their currency sovereignty. Okay, if you're the US and you have the global reserve currency, this is like a tremendous amount of power. Are you going to give that up? Are you going to turn over? That's like saying, hey, listen, let's just, this military that we've spent trillions of dollars building, let's just sign it over to the world. Is this going to happen? No, this is not going to happen. Okay, not going to happen. Now, will the US dollar eventually lose its status as being the top currency in the world? Yes. How long will that take? Probably a few decades. It's hard to say though, right? It could take less, it could take more, who knows, right? That's a very difficult, predicting the future in that sense is very difficult. You can say, hey, listen, at some point it's going to happen. What will the replacement currency be? Very interesting, right? Hard to say. A lot of people are saying, hey, listen, we're going to go to this blockchain currency, like some Bitcoin thing. I can absolutely guarantee you Bitcoin will not be a global reserve currency in the next few years. Will not happen. Again, it's simply, you can see the signs that it's not ready for prime time. I'm investing quite a lot in cryptocurrencies these days, And I can tell you the Ethereum gas fees are just insanely high. The transaction speeds, I just converted over some Bitcoin earlier tonight. And the amount of time it took to validate those transactions, it took like hours, right? Which is slow compared to what it sometimes is. Sometimes the network can be very fast, right? So the network is simply not at the stage where it is ready for that volume of transactions. The currencies themselves, or if you want to call them that, simply do not have the market cap to sustain the volumes of money that would need to go into there. So those things are not happening anytime soon. 10 years, 20 years out from here, maybe, right? Maybe. I'm pretty skeptical. I have my whole own idea around that. But the point is, people who are concerned that this is happening today, your concerns, you can kind of lay that to rest as being an immediate problem. However, okay, that's the like kind of extreme side over here, and we've got the extreme side over here. What is happening and what is likely to affect you? Well, the reality is that environmental regulations are almost certainly coming in, right? Wealth redistribution policies are almost certainly coming in. We can see this already over the last number of years, right? We can see places like Spain as a leading indicator of what's coming in. We can take a look and we can see what's happening in California, right? We can take a look and we can see, hey, listen, how are they implementing environmental policies and saying, hey, listen, we're going to require that you have electric vehicles, et cetera. So if you're somebody who's concerned about your degree of freedom, about, well, you're preserving your wealth, et cetera, that's probably got some legitimacy to it, right? I certainly take that very seriously. And so the question then becomes, all right, if governments in a lot of the world are going to be trying to implement these things, what are the things that you can do to kind of maintain your own freedom and sovereignty, right? Having some control over your destiny in the world. I would say there's a number of different things. So first of all, it is worth having the first thing, which is what I would call optionality, okay? So what is optionality all about? I'll do a whole video on this in the future, but optionality is the idea that you can pick and choose, okay? So the reality is we as humans suck at making predictions, okay? We're incredibly inaccurate. If you ask somebody what's the exchange rate between the US dollar and JPY going to be, you know, a year from now, it's just like, you might as well take darts and throw them at a dartboard. You're so inaccurate at picking that. What are interest rates going to be 5 years from now? No idea, right? What is unemployment rate going to be? No idea, et cetera, right? Like, very, very far off. We really are bad at making those types of predictions. What's the stock market going to be at, et cetera. So in the face of uncertainty, how do we deal with that, okay? We can just go for extreme diversification, right? Extreme diversification is usually kind of bad because it's kind of like diversification. I have a video on this. You can go and check out my kind of thoughts on diversification, how to diversify in a very smart way. But what you can do is you can have optionality. So what does optionality mean? Optionality means that you have a bunch of different options available to you. So let's take myself, for example. I have like about 4 places where I can illegally go and be resident like that, right? I already have residency permits, or I have like some tie into there, citizenship, etc., which allows me, if something goes wrong in any one of those places, I have someplace else I can go. This is optionality, right? I don't know, I'm not picking, I'm not committing, I'm not saying, hey, listen, this is the one to go to. Instead, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to remain flexible. And if things start to look bad over here, I can always go over here. So I think one of the smartest things that we can be doing in our lives today is to establish optionality, okay? Start building up some options for yourself. So let's use some specific examples. I talked to a client earlier tonight, and he was just discussing with respect to bank accounts, right? Very traditional business person, nothing crazy, etc. But is looking at cases where the government just went into somebody and just took the money out of their bank account. And he's like, hang on, I don't really want to be in the position where that can happen to me. So now, any given government could in theory do that to you, right? So what can you do? Well, you can have multiple bank accounts in multiple countries, right? It's not a big deal to go and to open up a bank account in, heck, one in, 3 different continents, right? You've got 3 different countries, 3 different continents. What's the probability that's going to happen in all 3 of them at the same time? Pretty low, right? Pretty low. And so what does it cost you? Okay, so this is the second part of optionality. If options are really expensive to you, it's maybe not worth going for them, right? Because the truth is, when you're paying for an option, it might not need to come to fruition. So the best options are basically free options. This is one of the things I've been advocating to people quite a bit lately with respect to citizenships and residencies, okay? Is let's say that I'm gonna buy a property anyway, right? Okay, I'm gonna do some real estate investing. Fantastic, wonderful. Well, I could choose to invest down the street next to where my other property is, or I could go to another part of the world where I can get a residency permit, where I can get a citizenship, where I can get something else, right? In both cases, I'm going to invest, I have the money sitting there, I'm going to invest the money, I'm going to get a rate of return on the money. So, you know, what am I doing? I'm establishing some optionality, right? The cost of that option essentially becomes zero, right? Or very close to zero. If the cost of an option is close to free, you should almost always take it. That would be kind of the basic piece of advice that I would have. So similar thing with bank accounts. What does it cost you to set up and maintain a bank account? It's very little, right? It's a minuscule amount. And so as a result, it pays you to have a few different options available, right? I always tell people this when you're building corporate structures, always have at least 2 bank accounts for your company, ideally 3, right? Because you just don't know what's gonna happen. Banks today are crazy and you might have some issue, they shut your account down. What happens? Well, you have another one. If you don't have the other one, you're panicking, things are bad, right? But if you've got 2 extra options, you're like, okay, it's a pain, it's not really what I want, but I redirect payments to there and off I go, right? If you can separate that out into multiple countries or multiple continents, multiple currencies, etc., even better. Multiple currencies is a little bit weirder because of the fact that usually you're transacting in one currency or a couple currencies. And so, you know, if you're living in the US, to have a euro account is kind of like, okay, well, you know, what's the real advantage of it? Okay, so anyway, the whole point is, number one, establish optionality. And anytime you can get a virtually free or cheap option, go for it, okay? So travel, meet people abroad, get other residencies, possibly other citizenships, set up other bank accounts. These would be like some really easy things that you can do to establish some optionality. Likewise, when it comes to investments, right? Having some different diversification in your investments, in the types of your assets, is helpful. If you're thinking, hey, listen, I'm worried that the government in some country might seize my assets, okay, well, what can I do about that? Number one, I can have assets that are not easy to seize, right? So let's use an example. I can have physical gold as opposed to paper gold. I can have physical silver as opposed to paper silver. I'll do a video in the future on, you know, where you can buy and store, etc., gold and silver, right? So that's an example, right? I can have some sort of cryptocurrency, right? Again, harder for them to seize. Somebody can come and they can seize your bank account really easily if you have, you know, some gold bar or a Rolex watch or something like this. Great. Now, again, let's talk about the optionality of it. If you're going to buy gold anyway, you know, maybe you want to buy some jewelry, right? It's going to maintain its, if it's like it's golden jewelry, you know, great. Maybe that's one way of like establishing the zero cost portion of it, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm going to have it anyway. It's always nice to say, hey, listen, if I'm going to, you know, store my money in something, you know, might as well have it be in a house that I live in, right? That kind of thing. So you're getting use of it. So even if you're wrong, no big deal. You're benefiting from it. It's all good, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is geographically diversifying these things, right? So again, you can fairly easily, fairly inexpensively diversify your investments, not just between asset classes, but between asset jurisdictions, and along with that, currencies, okay? So in other words, if you're renting out a property in, let's say France, right? Probably not the best example, but let's just say France, you know, you're denominated in euros. If you're renting out a property in Atlanta, Georgia, you're denominated in US dollars, right? So you're getting some different exposure to currencies here. So that's potentially useful to you. So that would be the second thing, right? Is to basically say, okay, I have optionality, right? And number two, I'm bringing in things that I control more easily. It's more easy often to control, say, real estate than a bank account, right? It's more easy to control, say, Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency, which, by the way, if you're concerned about the volatility of it, you could get a stable coin. You could have something like DAI, right? I've advocated this a bunch of different times. And you could actually put that on a non-custodial lending platform and you can earn a rate of return on it. So, which is, by the way, far, far better than holding a bond. So I don't know why you'd hold a government bond today. You know, that's a whole other conversation. So anyway, the point is there are some different options for you in this regard. The next thing that I think is super important, super important, and perhaps not appreciated enough. And in this regard, I would invite you to reach out to us. I'd invite you to put some comments below, which is, hey, listen, building relationships with people in different walks of life and different parts of the world. To me, the ultimate safety net is a community of people who care about you. When you're contributing to that community and other people are contributing to you, the knowledge that if something goes wrong, somebody is there who is going to assist you is a big, big deal. And the problem for most people is they're very isolated in a little bubble. And so outside of that bubble, their resources are very low. It's one of the things that I appreciate about myself, having, traveled the world quite a lot. I know people in, I don't know, probably 50 countries or something, right? In all the different continents. So if I want to know what's going on in Kenya, I call somebody in Kenya who I know, I have a personal relationship, etc. When there was things going on in Hong Kong and there's a lot of media attention around it, etc., I called people in Hong Kong and I talked to them about it. I said, hey, listen, what do you think? Right? Get a different perspective than the sensationalized media view. And so building those relationships, I think, could be super valuable. And it just so happens that you can do that pretty easily again as part of what it is that you're doing anyway, right? You can say, hey, I have a hobby. Great. Join some sort of a group where you connect with people who are international about that hobby. You're going to travel. Great. Make some relationships there. You're somehow interested in certain types of business. Great. Build some relationships there. Like, building relationships, I think, is just the cornerstone of having a rich life and a safe life, etc. And again, one of the beautiful things about this is not something that will cost you anything, right? This is something that will enrich you. And so, hey, like, worst case scenario, like, nothing goes wrong and you have a good relationship with those people. Wonderful. This is fantastic. There's zero downside here. This is all upside. So those would be my 3 suggestions. Okay, optionality, right? Getting some options. Number 2, things that you can control more yourself, right? Maybe that would be, different land, maybe that's property, maybe it's different types of investment assets, maybe it's, I don't know, guns, right? Whatever it is for you, right? Something like that. And then number 3 is really working on building a diverse set of relationships that can serve you and can put you in a position that you have kind of a safety net. And I guess the thing that goes beyond that is building influence, right? So that influence can hopefully be useful in the future. So anyway, those are my thoughts around some of the things that you can do today to work on, diverting against, who knows what is coming, right? I think that there will be a lot of turbulence, and not so much just because somebody has an agenda to go and change things, but because we live in a society where we've built up increasing fragility, and the fragility of that system is kind of shaking. And so there's a whole bunch of things that are pulling us in different directions that will inevitably have consequences that are pretty negative. So anyway, tell me what you think. Tell me that I'm off base. Tell me, hey, listen, Michael, you don't know what you're talking about. They're gonna, come in and do X, Y, Z. Great. Would love to hear your opinion. Would love to hear your opinions about what you think can be done to kind of protect yourself against some of the concerning trends. Because literally, I mean, we can all look around. We can see there's a whole bunch of concerning trends in the world. That's not up for debate. And so, yeah, and if you're at all interested in help with, building some sort of an international plan, with moving abroad, with international structuring, etc., feel free to reach out to me. There's a link below in the description, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. And check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. I'm going to see you guys on the next video.